Hello, 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 and welcome to the My Empty Hands podcast, a podcast about the martial arts, focusing on Kempo. And I am Reggie Darden, and today I have with me Jason and Creel, and we're going to just, talk Kempo and talk about. I usually kind of give my background, but I'm gonna kind of change it up here, and we'll just kind of get into it as we go along. So, Mr. Krill, if you could go ahead and tell us how did Kempo find you, and where did it all start for you, and how.
Hey Reggie, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's an incredible honor. My journey started in 1994. I had always been fascinated with martial arts, but couldn't really afford lessons. So around 94, two things happened. One was my mom married a guy named Randy Kilpatrick, God bless his soul. And he had a little bit of martial arts knowledge, but he loved it. And he shared that enthusiasm with me. But then I also would network and get a hold of anybody that had anything to teach in their backyard. And so I got a little bit of Taekwondo, a little bit of Shokan karate, a little bit of sport karate, a little bit of Kung Fu, a little bit of Kabuto, anything I could get my hands on. But in 1995, my mother hands me this newspaper article, and it's a little article about a guy teaching martial arts at a church, and it's a Kenpo guy. I'm like, that sounds so familiar. And then it clicked. That's the same art in The Perfect Weapon. It's one of my favorite movies. Sweet. And so my, 14, almost 15-year-old geek brain goes into overtime. And so I end up studying under a gentleman named Charles Powers, who was originally under Lynn Broussard way back in the 80s. And at that time that I got under him, he was under Jody Sasaki's lineage. He wasn't the most technical. He was very old school, rough and tumble. We did a lot of sparring. I actually on both shins have little pea-sized calcium deposits, and I credit training under Sifu Powers for those. My doctor was like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. People get them." But I studied Mr. Powers from 1995 to 1998. I received my first degree brown belt under him, and then he was dealing with some illness, and he decided he was going to take a break from teaching. So at this point, the original group of us, there was only two of us willing to keep going. Myself and a close friend of mine named Chris Clark. So we kept going. We contacted Jody Sasaki. We actually became his former representatives in Mississippi for a time. But the long distance without any in-person interaction, I mean, it's testing. Anybody who has done a distance program on either side, teacher or student, would know. So we went looking, and in late 1998, I lucked out and discovered a guy. I was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at the time. We are an hour and a half from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Well, there's a guy down there named Rick Brumby, and he is an AKKI representative, American Kempo Karate International, under Paul Mills. And so I drive down there. I formally get accepted by him. I'm accepted into the AKKI, and it is a massive world of technical detail in what we do. So I go from being very rough and tumble, very loosey-goosey with the principles and concepts, to a method and system that requires absolute detailing to the concepts and principles. In fact, I feel bad for Rick because he spent the first year and a half training me going, relax your shoulders, stop doing this, stop doing that. He had to weed out so many bad habits. But it was frustrating for me, but at the same time, later on, looking back, it was such a learning process of here's why we do certain things the way we do. Here's why we treat the system as a process rather than a collection. I'll get to that later. Here's why we do things in a particular order so that we are developing and blueprinting a way of executing every single movement so that we've got the most technical detail and therefore power, speed, accuracy, intent behind what we do. And so going into the Ikigai, it was an absolute blessing. I remained with the Ikigai until 2011. And then, so as any old school person knows, the Ikigai had some very peculiar policies, including what some of us called a closed door policy. And being broke graduate student in Mississippi, going through school and trying to build a healthcare career, it really limited my options. 10. I went from, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, so let me back up a little bit. So up until I was 27, I lived in Mississippi. Then I moved to Louisiana. And I was a recreation therapist at the time. And so I was going back and forth. I finally could afford to go to the Paul Mills International Kempo camps. And that's just, I'm a Kempo geek. So this just brought my geekdom to a whole other level.
Yeah, very nice.
And then I moved out to Utah. So, and around the time I moved out to Utah, Mr. Mills had moved the international camps from Las Vegas to Evanston, which, well, Evanston's like an hour and a half up the road from me. So there was no stopping me here. And it's great. And I'm going to the camps. And then I ran into some financial difficulty. I had to move back home to Mississippi for a time. Well, now I went from being at the doorstep of the Mecca of Paul Mills Kempo Karate all the way back home in Mississippi. And I'm broke. I'm going back to school. So all of a sudden, it was like that world, because I couldn't travel, was closed off. Now, this is before the days of Zoom and video conferencing and all the communication, all the access we have. And so the policies were basically working against me at that point. And so I made the decision, and I can't tell you if it was a rash decision or not, but in 2011, I made the decision to resign from the AKKI and go about my own path. And I will say this, it is one of the very best things I've done for myself as a martial artist, is when you strike out on your own, regardless of how much you know at that point or how much you understand, when you strike on your own, it forces you to put everything, both internally and externally, through this critical process of thinking. And you question it, you want to test it, you want to retest it, you want to make sure that what you're teaching, what you're doing, what you're thinking, the direction you want to go is the best thing for your students. And so it elevated my thinking and my process to a whole other level. And so at that point, I'm a little scattered though. I'm reaching out to Kelly. I'm reaching out to Skip Hancock. I'm reaching out to several prominent people in the Kempo community trying to find my next direction. And I wound up under the tutelage of 2012, I ended up under the tutelage of a man named Dr. Dave Crouch. And he's out of California, the West Coast. And I'm just going to go ahead and just pay some fanfare here for a moment. Dr. Dave Crouch is one of those guys that has forgotten more about Kempo than I will ever know. Like, he's old school. For the most part, he's worked behind the shadows, behind the scenes. He's very, very humble. But the man is genius. And he took me on as a student, not just as a student, but as a friend, as a little brother. So when I say this man is my Sifu and my mentor, there's no other person that can claim that. And so he really brought me through the process of critical thinking even more so. And he has remained in that role to this day and always will. So regardless of whether I kick it first or he kicks it first, I will remain, his faithful student. He also encourages, though, cross training, expanding. Dr. Crotch was never confined by not old school traditions. Back in the days, people would cross train, people would cross pollinate, is the phrase he likes to use, and share ideas. Some point along in the martial arts, they came to an age where no, you're right where you belong. You don't need anything else. And I think that really did a disservice to people in the martial arts as a whole. When we went from, especially the Kempo arts, when we went from cross-training, cross-sharing, cross-pollinating to, no, you're in our association. This is all that you need.
Mhm.
It really kind of did everybody, in my opinion, a disservice.
I agree. I agree with that. With Kempo, I find it's kind of odd that there would be people or organizations that are not about cross pollinating, because in my perspective, Kempo makes a really, really great base for connecting with other. It's a good foundation, and it plugs in well with other styles, other methods of training, other techniques and whatnot.
You are absolutely correct. And it's strange that we hit that point somewhere along the way where cross training was discouraged, given Kenpo's history. So Kenpo, Kenpo is the Japanese word for Xuanfa, which is fist law, which is what Chinese martial arts were known well before anybody came up with the term gung fu or kung fu. And so in the Hawaiian Islands, between William Kwai Sun Chow on the Hawaiian Islands and RQE Wong in California, I mean, just between those two, look at everything that came about. We had Ed Parker's Kempo. We had the continuation of William Kwai Sun Chow's Kempo. We had Kaju Kempo. We have Lima Lama. Like, there is so much. There is an entire wealth just along that short little trek across the pond. And it was due to cross-training, cross-sharing, cross-pollination. Like, that is how Kempo came to be. That's how even Ed Parker Kempo, a lot of newer practitioners like to pretend that, and this is going to be one of those I said what I said moments, but a lot of the newer generations of Ed Parker Kempo like to believe that he just popped out the womb, being Ed Parker and Thunder and Lightning and all that. No, Ed Parker had his own process. And it was a process of cross-pollination, cross-training, and cross-sharing. And so I'm going to kind of touch base on it. So getting back to Dr. Dave Crouch, he absolutely encourages it. I mean, and it's beautiful because the martial arts as a whole, it's not a vacuum limited to Kempo. I mean, they say there's nothing new under the sun, and to a degree they're correct. But if we stop sharing, if we stop cross-pollinating, if we stop cross-training, we are going to become extinct. And I don't say that as to mean, oh my God, Kempo needs this, Kempo needs that. Kempo needs an open mind. Now, where the individual practitioner goes with that open mind is up to them. But Kempo does need an open mind. Mr. Parker, when I say Mr. Parker was a genius, I'm not, and again, I started Kempo 5 years after he passed away, so I'm not the authority on the subject of Ed Parker. But I've spent enough time in the company of people that did spend time in the company with Ed Parker they basically all give the same picture. Mr. Parker was a genius, and his brain operated on many different levels. Unfortunately, though, so Mr. Parker was one of those brilliant, deadly martial artists. However, he was also a husband and father. He was also a guy that had to pay bills. And so ultimately the Ed Parker Kempo Karate system that he put out, and it was solidified in the Volume 5 of Ed Parker's Infinite Insights into Kempo. Some people like to call it the 1988 version of Ed Parker Kempo. It is a masterpiece, but it's also a snapshot, A, and B, a delivery system. See, Ed Parker couldn't be in every school every day, blueprinting and polishing skills and basics. So he had to create a delivery model. And again, I'm going to replace the term system for a little bit with the term delivery model. He had to create a delivery model that could get his ideas to masses, to a massive audience in the shortest amount of time possible. So Kempo became very conceptual, and it's one of its strengths and it's one of its weaknesses as well. Because now you've got a bunch of guys that we say we all know delayed sword, but we're all doing it a little bit differently, and there's no blueprint as far as the how. In Kempo, we talk about the what, the why, and the how. The what is the written curriculum. The why is the logic behind the curriculum. They say he who knows what is the student, but he who knows how is the teacher, but they leave out the how. Ed Parker was. I mean, any look at any video of him, that man was in the way of thunder and lightning. So he had to leave out most of the how in his delivery model to get his ideas, his concepts, his principles, and his message to a wide audience. Because the how requires in person, it requires a very detailed approach, not just to what we're doing and why we're doing it, but how we're doing it. How are we getting from point A to point B as far as a natural stance to an inward block to the inside of a right punch? And so you see so many variations of it. Mr. Parker himself, let's get back to Ark Wong. RQE Wong, so RQ Wong was born around 1900 in Canton, China. He immigrated to the United States. A lot of guys like to say it's a popular misconception that Bruce Lee, Li Jianfan, was the first individual in America to teach non-Chinese. That is completely irrevocably false. It was RQE Wong. And at the time, RQE Wong taught, well, anybody that wasn't white. And he had his reasons. And I completely, from a historical standpoint, agree with his reasons. But he was the very first to teach Chinese martial arts secrets to non-Chinese. It wasn't Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was the first guy to teach white guys. And if you know anything about the history and racist aspect of Chinese relations in North America, particularly in the Western states, you'll quickly understand why. RQE Wong was, in every aspect a grandmaster. And he brought with him not just several styles of Kung Fu, but the biomechanical secrets that they carried. And by biomechanical secrets, I mean things that we can do with motion, with movement in the body to strengthen the body behind the motion, behind the movement. We like to use, especially in my school, we like to use the analogy of a truck. I drive a truck, and I'll tell my students, so if I were to go out there with some tools and take the bumper off my truck and hold my bumper and run at you, is it really going to hurt you? And the answer is no. It might irritate you, but it's not going to hurt you. But if the bumper is on the truck, because the bumper is the fist, the bumper is the shin, the bumper is the foot, the bumper is the natural weapon, but does it have the truck behind it? Ark Wong had a lot of knowledge of what to do with the body to put the bumper or the truck behind the bumper. And that's what he passed on to Ed Parker. This was an Ed Parker, they call it his Chinese Kempo era. And if you look at his literature, he had Kempo Karate, the first book, and then he had Secrets of Chinese Karate. And that book, we call it the SOC book, Secrets of Chinese Karate. Anybody seriously interested in looking at Ed Parker's evolution needs to grab a copy of that book. It's on Amazon. Go get it. And it was when Ed Parker, the Ed Parker that we knew, become Ed Parker. So his introduction to RQE Wong was through a man named Hamal Lafiti. They call him Tiny. Dude was 6'5", 270 pounds. Dude was a big dang Samoan. He was bigger than Mr. And Tiny Lafiti moved like thunder and lightning and the God hand himself. And Mr. Parker went. And so he jumped in, got under Ark Wong for a time, and learned how to really work the body, work the truck behind the bumper, how to align the bumper with the body. And that's what made Mr. Parker, that's when he went from being who he was to who we knew. You know, I have a saying, everybody wants to be 10th degree black belt, thunder and lightning Ed Parker, but nobody wants to start at first degree black belt, struggling with his basics, going through the process.
Yeah,
Again,
you definitely have to do the work. Anybody that we look up to or gets to whatever particular position, more often than not, they had to do the work to get to that point. And yeah, I think some people lose sight of that. You know, kind of like you said, you know, they think, oh well, you know, Ed Parker just popped out and he was Ed Parker. And it's like, no, there's a lot that goes into becoming that personality and that that leader. That's you have to work at it.
There absolutely is. You know, Mr. Parker found his process. You know, the thing that made Mr. Parker great was that no matter how much he understood, no matter how much he knew, no matter how much he could, no matter how great he was insatiably thirsty for more knowledge, and he sought it out. He looked at everything and he gleaned what he could. He incorporated it. He had this mind of, he was brilliant. It's not just fanfare. The man was brilliant. I believe that around the time of his death, he was looking at the next stage of Kempo and what he was going to offer, because even though he still had bills to pay, and he had to be a businessman with a businessman's mind as far as the delivery model he provided. It would still evolve to keep up with the times and the demands of the times. And of course, 3 years after it passed, this skinny little twerk from Brazil wiped the floor with a whole bunch of big guys. And, that changed the landscape of martial arts, especially in America, forever. And I believe that Mr. Parker would have been a little bit ahead of that had he not passed away. That's the way the man's mind worked. You made a good point about most people want to emulate Ed Parker, but emulation, just physical visual emulation, isn't enough. It won't have the speed, it won't have the power, it won't have the accuracy, and it won't have the intent. Those are the four big attributes of martial arts, in my opinion, as far as combat goes: speed, power, accuracy, and intent. Mr. Parker had all of those, and then some on top of that. But he went through a process to get it. He went through the paces. We look at videos of Mr. Parker and it's like, holy smokes, that guy is just thunder and lightning, but he wasn't always thunder and lightning. He had to go through that process. It was a very mechanical process from Professor Chow to Ark Wong, and then he got on Ark Wong, and then it became a whole other beast. Now he started learning how to really use certain movements, whether they be large movements or small, subtle movements. But these movements recruited skeletal structure. They recruited muscular reinforcement. And so now the Kempo he presented is still 100% Ed Parker's Kempo, but you have to look at the process and the people he learned from. And the two biggest influences there is going to be William Kwai-Sun Chow and Ark Wong. And Ark Wong is the one that not a lot of people in the modern Kempo community really give a whole lot of credit to. Now, Ark Wong was also one teacher of Tino Tuolesega, who anybody in the arts would know as the founder of Lima Lama. And anybody who remembers Tino from back in the day before his strokes and heart attacks, or anybody who has seen his old footage, they could look at him and go and look at Ed Parker, and they could go look at the little bit of footage of Tiny Lafitte, and they go, holy crap, there's a common thread there. Well, that common thread was Ark Wong and Kung Fu art known as mop guard or splashing hands.
Nice. So to kind of get back to your journey there, is there any, well, I'm sure you have tons of story, but can you maybe tell me about just a moment that stands out in your training, preferably pre-black belt, but just kind of any story that kind of sticks out in your mind, or situation maybe that kind of jumps out to you that you'd like to share.
Oh boy, I said ask the hard question, then you did. Now it's like, wow, which one do I pick? Mr. Parker had a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't quote it verbatim, but he basically said, guts and conditioning and willpower take over where technique will stop. My brown belt test, it was in July of 1997. Now, the old timers are going to go, hi, you're still a baby, and they're right. I am still. They're absolutely correct. I'm still a baby. My brown belt test was Mr. Powers taught at church, and so this church was on the eastern side of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Anybody from my hometown will know that's not the best part of town. And so I didn't have a car then. I rode a bike everywhere, and my brown belt test was in the middle of July in South Mississippi. So anybody that has never been to the Southeast, you're not going to get it, but it's hot down here. Not only hot, but it is incredibly humid down here. And so the brown belt test was about how much technique and technical knowledge is still going to be present after we have worn down the body. and worn down the mind. So Mr. Powers' methodology, and everybody's brown belt test was a little bit different. That's what I love about him. He individualized his test for everybody. He based it on them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what he was thinking or what I did to peeve him off, but my brown belt test started with him. So I'm in a white gi, green belts, and he's going to drive me roughly a mile east of the church. So we've gone from bad neighborhood to, dude, what are you doing here? Neighborhood. And he had a 94 Mustang. It was a dark red. So he drives me east. He stops. He tells me to get out of the car. We're in a residential neighborhood. He walks to the trunk, and it was either a 70 or 100-pound punching bag. I'm not gonna lie. I don't remember which. And he tells me to grab it, throw it over my shoulder, walk back to the church. Again, it's July. I am a 6-foot white kid in a place where a 6-foot white kid should not be, and I've got about a mile walk ahead of me. So I start walking, and I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty nervous. So I get back to the church, and I mentioned Chris Clark earlier. He was a couple of belts ahead of me. He was one of Mr. Powers' instructors or assistant instructors at that time. He's waiting there at the front of the church, hands on his hips with this big grin on his face, this evil grin. He goes, okay, 5 laps around the church. Now, by church standards, it was not a big church, but I went ahead. I got my laps. I got my 5 laps in. I'm still feeling pretty good. He goes, okay, 5 more. Chris is one of my closest friends, but in that moment, I hated him. So I get my next 5
don't
laps.
blame you. I am not a runner, and that would he would not get a Christmas card that year.
I don't think he did get a Christmas card that year, but so I do my 5 more laps. At this point, mentally, I'm close to being kind of broken at this point. Like, I am tired. And I'm one of those guys where when I'm physically tired, I don't learn well. I don't talk well. Like, my technique goes out the window. Or at least at that point I was. And so at this point, that's when the technical test started. Was I go in and I have to go through all the basics. I have to explain the principles and I have to demonstrate them. Then we go to the forms. And I'm in my head, I'm botching it like badly, but I'm 17 years old. No, scratch that. I was a few months before I turned 17, so I still had that youthful, rebellious. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to get this, and so I can't promise my technique was all that, but I didn't fall out just yet. Yet being the operative term. And then we go through the techniques and we go through all the techniques up to that point, and I'm exhausted, but I've got my second wind. I'm feeling good. And he goes, okay, let's start back at yellow belt and go through them again. And I didn't cry outwardly, but inside I was crying. I'm just going to be point blank honest. And there's a lesson here. So after all that's done, Mr. Powers has Chris take me back outside, and I have to do 4 more laps. At this point, I think I've died somewhere in this test, and I'm in hell. I'm in hell. I've died. They hate me. What do I do? But I keep on. I push on. And then I come back inside, and then we have to spar. So I'm going to stop the story right there. The point of that is, and it goes for me later on, I didn't fully understand until later on, but willpower and guts and conditioning will take over where technique and knowledge let off. And that was the point of the test. My black belt test was not that hard. No test I've had since then has been that difficult. And it was kind of not just a test, but a rite of passage. And Mr. Powers had a very simple methodology that I've carried forward to this day. I know you're ready when I decide to test you. I know you've earned the rank. I know you're worthy of the rank. I know you're at that level. What I know doesn't mean anything until you see it for yourself. And for some of us who are very, very self-critical, the test itself has to be the thing that shows us, yes, we did earn it. We have to the test has to remove all doubt from our mind. And so therefore the test has to break us down. So again, I'm going to paraphrase Mr. Parker's words. Willpower and guts and conditioning will take over where technique and knowledge fail. And I think we've lost that in the martial arts as a whole, but especially the Kempo community, is that Kempo is about survival. Kempo is about, now the ultimate aim of Kempo, and this is something that one of my other teachers, Scott Hildebrand, tells me often, the ultimate point of Kempo is to make better people, which I agree. But warriors are also better people. And so if we're not challenging ourselves to the extent that every once in a while we break ourselves down to see what we're still made of, we're losing a very critical lesson found within the martial arts. And so I'm grateful for that brown belt test because, again, no test I've had since has been that difficult. Like, that test broke me mentally, and I passed out after the test, thank God, but it left this idea of what testing really is. The test is not for your instructor. The test is not for formality. The test is to show you as a student you're ready, but it won't mean a thing. That belt will not mean a thing until you see you have earned it. And for some people, you have to break them down to do it. And you don't break them down in a negative way. You break them down first with their body and then let their mind get tired and then let them shine. And most people will rise to that occasion if you give them the opportunity. And then when they put that new belt on, they get kicked in. There's no doubt in their mind. Self-doubt is the destroyer of human beings, the destroyer of good people, and the destroyer of martial artists. So if our belt tests are designed and intended to break that self-doubt down, we make better martial artists and we make better students, and therefore better people. Now, the military understands this, but somewhere in the martial arts, we've lost this, especially in commercial sorefoot Kempo. So I hope that was quite a ramble, but that was when you said, hey, give me a memory of your journey before black belt. That's the biggest one. And
I like that.
I continue that to this day. I've been teaching since 1998. And in that time period, I promoted one person to the rank of black belt. And it was Taylor Evans. He's actually my nephew as well. He started with me in 2011. In early 2023, finally testing for his black belt. And Taylor's like me. He's going to question. He's humble to the point where, am I sure? Do I really deserve this? Do I really know what I'm talking about? Do I really have this? And so the test for him had to be, I knew he was ready, but it didn't matter if he had a doubt. So the test had to break him down and show him what he was made of. And it did. And so that lesson I credit from Mr. Powers. And I feel like it's something that really is missing from Kempo altogether. Kempo should not be easy. Kempo should be productive. Kempo should be fun, but it should not be easy. And if it's easy, we're doing something wrong. If it doesn't challenge us, if it doesn't make us question ourselves to some extent, we're not growing in Kempo. We're just doing some hobby and calling it Kempo.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. And definitely gives me something to look forward to as we're recording. A few weeks out from my green belt test, and yeah, that was pretty brutal. Yeah, brown's going to be fun. So luckily, I've got a while before I get there. I got some building up to do before I get broken down again.
You're absolutely going to rock it out, my friend. I promise.
Alrighty. So what would be kind of your thought of where Kempo is now, and kind of where would you like to see it go in the future? You know, with the popularity of MMA coming up, you know, has really kind of changed people's viewpoints of the martial arts, and just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts about Kempo, about, you know,
I
where it should
sincerely
go.
believe, that MMA addressed within the martial arts community that the martial arts community previously met. You know, people of the two generations before me, they talk about the 60s, the 70s, the early 80s, the days where people would train in absolute heat. They train without air conditioning. They train till there's blood on the floor, yada blah. And they're not just talking smack, though. We had some real hardcore people that, for whatever reason was in them, they just wanted to hit. They wanted to throw down. And at some point, the martial arts, the commercial martial arts as a whole within the United States, stopped meeting that need. And so when Rorion Gracie debuts The Ultimate Fighter in 1993. All those guys that have had that itch to throw down and they haven't found a way to scratch it, well, now they've got a way to scratch it. I believe that MMA partly grew from an unmet need that the martial arts within America used to meet back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and the early 80s. At some point, due to liability, due to commercial success, due to people getting soft as a whole, maybe, the martial arts stopped meeting that need, and MMA picked it up. Because you're always going to have a group of guys that, for whatever reason, they just want to throw down. Not saying they're bad guys. I mean, society needs more guys like that. The martial arts, especially Kempo, just stopped meeting those needs for them. And so MMA picked up. So for us to revitalize, we've got to start showing, yes, we can still throw down. We can still throw down on that level. We don't hide behind a uniform or a belt or a curriculum. We can still glove up and show what we're made of. We can put our money where our mouth is. That was the basis of the Gracie Challenge. Now, the Gracie Challenge, it was kind of, let me back up and say, I'm not a jiu-jitsu guy, but I've trained jiu-jitsu. I absolutely love jiu-jitsu. It is an absolute necessary component. Even if you don't dive into trained jiu-jitsu, you should still be very aware of what you're dealing with. Mr. Paul Mills used to say, if you're going to learn how to defend something against something, you've got to learn how to use it yourself. And so I look at jiu-jitsu and grappling the same way. Now, unfortunately, jiu-jitsu's got this little thing called gravity on its side, but that's just life. So when the Gracie Challenge came out, nobody knew what hit him, and it was such a brilliant marketing move. But at the same time, it was also a very honest, combative move as well. We've got to not only evolve, but get back to an ideal that we had in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where we are not afraid to glove up and put our money where our mouth is, good, bad, for better or worse. And again, because of liability, because of people trying to make a living with martial arts and commercial school fronts, we lost that something. And MMA transformed into a sport, and then it attracted those guys that previously would have been in someone's backyard with 6-ounce gloves and shin pads and just beating the snot out. So in my opinion, to get to where MMA is, and it's possible, I just don't think it's probable. We've got to get back to a place where, yes, we can talk about principle all day long, we can do forms and sets and techniques all day long, but we have to be able to glove up and throw down and put some of these principles into action. And that's where a lot of Kempo guys fail, because of the delivery model. You know, I've heard people say, well, show me how you use your technique in sparring. Well, what do you mean by technique? Do you mean 5 swords? Or do you mean me angle off to find a superior angle, throw down that superior angle to find a better angle of incidence, forward pressure, and use Mr. Parker's analogy of the 7-course dinner and roll through your defenses? You know, what's technique? 5 swords or an active live application of the principles? If we say, well, a technique is 5 swords or delayed sword or clutching feathers, or we're missing the point of what Kempo could be. I heard a jiu-jitsu guy say one time, and it stuck with me, drillers make killers. And so I've always said for the longest time, with Kempo, you can do one or two things. You can learn how to fight, or you can learn how to dance. Now, if your Kempo is completely choreographed, you're failing. You're absolutely losing as a martial artist. But if you take the lessons inherent and you drill them and you make them alive, now you're doing a martial art. So Kempo guys, I'm going to address just Parker Kempo. We've got to stop dancing. We've got to stop worrying about, well, I knew this technique, and if this technique fails, then I've got this other technique. We've got to learn how to take the lessons from those techniques and just drill them. We've got to learn how to understand and apply the principles, not just quote them, but drill them, put them, like Mr. Paul Mills would say, put it to the edge of your hand and the edge of your foot. If you can't put it to the edge of your hand and the edge of your foot, you don't understand it. You don't know it. We have to go beyond the choreography. One of my biggest criticisms of the Parker Kempo systems that is so material heavy that a lot of guys most guys end up memorizing and then just regurgitating what they've memorized. But it's not alive. It's not spontaneous. They haven't drilled these principles. They haven't isolated and drilled these lessons. Every technique in the Kempo system has at least one lesson to it, at least one golden nugget to it, that if you just extrapolate that, isolate and pull it out, and then drill it, and then start drilling it with different scenarios. There's Kempo. It's not in dancing. It is in taking the lessons and then drilling them to a point where you can take this and apply it to multiple scenarios. You don't have to think about it. And so then if you ask those guys, well, show me how you're using your technique in sparring, they're not talking about 5 swords or clutching feathers or delayed sword or begging hands or any of that. They're talking about stepping off the line, finding that superior angle, drilling through, nullifying the forward defenses, which Mr. Parker would call that an appetizer, drilling through the secondary defenses, Mr. Parker would call that the salad. And the secrets to Kenpo, the secrets to making it work, are there in the literature. They really are. We overlook them. We're too busy going through choreographed sequences. And when it comes time to test for a belt, we're not fighting, we're dancing. And Kenpo is meant to be so much more than that. So I hope that answered the question of how do we get back to previous glory days? How do we get back to a previous level of high standard? And how do we learn how to compete with MMA? It's simple. We have to make competent fighters. The tools are there, but the perspective and how we approach it is everything. The biggest thing in training should be honesty. If we talk about self-defense, then we shouldn't be talking about short form 1. Short form was a tool. It's not a performance, it's a tool. If we talk about self-defense and spontaneous self-defense, spontaneous action, we shouldn't be quoting the manual on how to do clutching feathers or how to do flashing wings. We should be pulling out the principles and then playing with it and then drilling it. Until we get to that point, we are going to remain in the same level as Taekwondo.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I agree with those thoughts. So to kind of head towards a close here, I've got a few little fun questions to throw at you.
All right.
First one being, do you have a favorite technique?
I don't. I really don't. I know that's not exactly the common or popular answer, but I really don't. At this stage in my Kempo journey, I don't really think much about techniques. Here's my idea of technique. Let's take a lead punch, which is a vertical punch with the dominant side forward. Let's play with that. But then let's play with that with an angle change. Let's play with that with a prefix of a rear hand check. Now, is that rear hand check a aggressive check against his guard? Is it a block against an uppercut? Do we change the angle? Do we go from he and I are both on a 12-6 line, and now I up the circle, and now I'm on a 4:30 to 10:30 line? When we talk about technique, that's where my mind goes. It does not go to a choreographed script now, if you asked me that question 5 years ago, it would have been 5 swords. Like everybody else, 5 swords. But I would play with 5 swords. If you give me an hour to talk about 5 swords, we're going to come up with about 12 different variations. So for me, technique is simply take a basic movement and then let's apply some principles. Let's apply the meat and potato principles. And for me in Kempo, one of the biggest meat and potato principles has to be finding the superior angle. And I preach this to my guys. I was an MMA trainer I was a stand-up trainer for an MMA team back in my late 20s. And I used to yell at my guys, get off the line. I had to break it down for them. Well, if, I'm in my corner, you're in your corner, we come out swinging. We are basically on a 12-6 line. And we stay on a 12-6 line. Why? If I'm facing you and we're both on a 12-6 line, you've got your defenses stacked against me. I don't want to fight that. I don't want to fight your defenses at their strongest. I want to fight your defenses at their weakness, which means I have to change the angle. I either up the circle to where I'm on a 430 to 1030 line, and then I can blast through your center line and take advantage of your width because I've nullified your depth. Or I can cut step to where I'm on a 730 to 130 line, and now I've got your back. The Kempo techniques teach us how to do this. We just don't pull those lessons out. Checking the storm is a god-awful technique. I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's a god-awful technique as written. There's so many things that go wrong with the written technique. If we're stepping off the line, we've got an extended outward block to a club attack that may not even be nullified by that block. So take away the attack. Take away the upper body. Look at the footwork. We have stepped off to 3 o'clock with our right foot. We have drawn our left foot in. Now we're on a superior angle on a cat stance from 430 to 1030. We have stepped off the line. We assume that the guy is stepping forward. Regardless of the attack, we assume the guy is stepping forward with his right side forward, with his right leg forward. Now we have got his center line wide open. He does not have the benefit of depth to protect him. And then we just drill right through. Take the lessons out of the techniques and then drill them into principle. So when you say, what's my favorite technique? It's not anything written. It's to take a single movement, a bread and butter movement, and then apply the most important principles to it. And for me, the most important principle is always working off the line, working the superior. The lessons are there in every single technique. They are there. We just have to get over the script. We have to get over the dance. We have to pull out the lesson, and then we have to drill it. And then we have to pressure test it. And then we have to throw in some what ifs, and we have to drill some more. And that is a lot more work than dancing. And that's where a lot of guys in Kempo fail. They'd rather dance and get a belt that way than learn how to fight with what they have.
Gotcha. I like it. So do you have a favorite form and or set?
I love finger set. Well, scratch that. I love finger set the way Paul Mills showed me one night at about 2 o'clock in the morning in the parking lot of a hotel in Litchfield, Illinois. Because it's not the standard finger set you see people taping, where they're throwing finger strikes as if they're punches. It really just, it was mind-blowing. In fact, I couldn't sleep that night because I was taking notes about what I saw. A finger set is about soft tissue manipulations, soft tissue strikes, and really manipulating the natural handles of the body, especially the head. This is something modern Kempo doesn't really address too much. I love finger set from the way I learned it from Paul Mills. I also love stance set from Dr. Ron Chappell, which is not the standard Ed Parker system stance set at all. It's more about biomechanics, particularly platform mechanics. So stance set from Ron Chappell, finger set from Paul Mills, and I am very fond of this AKKI Form 3. So I don't have a favorite technique, but I do have a couple of favorite sets and a favorite form, yes.
Excellent. So the next question is if there's anyone that you could train with, living or dead, fictional or non-fictional, who would that be?
Well, I don't deal with the fictional very much, so we're just going to go ahead and throw that off to the side. I mean, obviously Mr. Parker, if I ever had the opportunity. Ron Chappell, he is still living. He would, given the opportunity, I would get some more time with Mr. Mills. Now, I was never a direct student of Mr. Mills, but Mr. Mills was kind of my de facto grandfather. There's two people in the martial arts that have influenced my life. Karate, otherwise, it's Paul Mills and Dr. Dave Crouch. Paul Mills, when I was a kid, I didn't have a whole lot of positive role models, and Mr. Mills back in the late 90s, if you called him, he'd spend some time with you on the phone. He'd answer all your questions. Like, he would just pour it on. He would share everything. He was so giving. And so for this 18-year-old brown belt nobody from Mississippi, that meant the world to me. I didn't just pick his brain about karate. There were a couple of times where I was going through a crisis, and I would ask him what he would do, and he would share with that. So Ed Parker, non-living, and, well, Mr. Mills, because I don't know if everyone knows, Mr. Mills passed away February of last year, or this past year. And so, yeah, Mr. Parker, if I ever get the opportunity to go get some mat time with Ron Chappelle, absolutely.
Excellent. I like it. All right. And so the final question for today, in honor of Parker's love of humor, do you have a joke that you could share with us?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm come from an Irish family. Like, our jokes are not exactly the greatest.
That's fine. We can we'll find one. We'll find one to insert
Yeah,
at
I'll
another
follow
point.
up with you on that one.
All right. Well, yeah. I thank you so much for your time, for telling us about your journey and your knowledge. Quite I'm quite fond of the fact so we have a little bit. Our journeys are kind of similar. I got started because I saw The Perfect Weapon, and I started about 93, 94. It's good to see that someone that's not part of the old guard is knowledgeable about the history and whatnot.
Well, I greatly appreciate you having me on here. I mean, it's a massive honor.
Yeah, thank you. So last thing is, this is your time for shameless self promotion. So if there's anything you wanted to bring up that we didn't cover that you wanted to get out there, now's the time to do so.
I'm not great with self promotion. I run Southside Combat Club, which at this point is a garage based dojo in Sims, Alabama. We are looking at a commercial location very soon. I am the former founder of the Dynamic Kempo Concepts method, and along with Dr. Dave Crouch, co-founder of what we call the Tetsu Jinkai Karate method, which is really freestyle fighting. It's Kempo-based freestyle fighting, but it leans more toward the hard contact, full contact karate aspect. We believe in taking what Kempo has to offer in written form and then expanding it into other aspects. So that's about as self-promoting as I get.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, no, thank you again for your time, and I will let you know when this is ready to go out, and I'm excited for everyone to hear it. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, man.
Great. You have a great
You as well. Thanks.